The architects, the AIA, make the document. It's a standard document made by this professional association. And these documents are updated every 10 years typically, unless there's something else that comes up in the meantime. But generally, every document in their series is on a 10-year schedule for review and updating so that they always are keeping up with the current conditions of contracting in the United States. So since this is a review, again, I'm just going to do a quick overview of the first 5 sections of the first 5 articles of the A201. So start out with the basic definitions, the contract documents, the contract itself. All contracts have to have parties to the contract, and they have to have consideration, which is payment for the contract, to be a legal contract in the business law system. The work itself, that's the construction. The project is the whole of the work. So a construction project could have several sub-projects. The entire work is everything. The drawings, those are the construction documents, the contract documents. Specification, the book with the specific information on the project. And the instruments of service. Other creative work, such as maybe renderings, site studies, surveys, sketches, other materials, those are instruments of service. And this is a new thing in this version of the contract. Specifically, the architect becomes the initial decision maker for claims. So what this means is that if there's a dispute between the contractor and the owner, they come to the architect, and the architect says what the decision should be done with a good faith, reasonable decision on what should be done in that case. So correlation and intent of the contract documents. Sometimes they have to be clarified through RFIs or other means. And the organization into divisions. We use the standard division sections of the CSI so that everybody knows how to interpret the various sections of the specifications. And capitalization. So in the contract, some things may be capitalized, and these are the specific wording sections about that kind of thing. Interpretation. In other words, there's a lot of abbreviations. There are standard industry acronyms. There are things that are shorter than the actual word. So at times they could create some confusion about what is meant by that. Ownership and use of the drawings. Specifications, other instruments of service. The architect licenses the documents to the owner for use on that particular building at that particular location. That is the way the contract is written here, unless it's otherwise modified. And then if you have such a situation like somebody doing a prototype of a certain type of building for a franchise client, then the owner may purchase the right to do that building multiple times at multiple sites. But that is an additional change to the contract. That's not the standard A201 contract. That's not the standard B101 contract that the architect signs. The contractors are authorized to use the instruments of service on this project, but they can't use it on other projects. And claims, in typical contracts we have this where there's claims, who to notify, where to notify it. Here we have digital data and building information modeling, use and reliance. So it's basically, if we as the contractor rely on those models, it's at our own risk. And as far as ownership, then we have to look at these documents, the E203 and the G202 for understanding what the details of the project are, as far as the project modeling quality, as far as the level of design, the LOD of those BIM models. Article 2 talks about the owner. The owner is the person or entity building the project. And as usual, the owner needs to specify the financial arrangements for the project, and the contractor has the right to verify this. And information required by the contractor of the owner, that the owner shall hire an architect, that the owner shall do the necessary surveys, the necessary approvals for the entitlements, making sure that he owns actual easements and can afford the assessments and pay the city fees for this kind of project, as well as furnishing surveys and soils report for the project. So ordinarily, soils reports and any special reports for the project site is expected to be provided by the owner. The owner has the right to stop the work for any reason. The owner has the right to carry out work. So take over the project should the contractor fail. The owner then has the right to finish the project. Article 3, the contractor's responsibilities. The definition of the contractor, the review of contract documents and field conditions. Always, the contractor is expected to have knowledge of the field conditions of that particular site and to be incredibly in sync with and understand the plans, specifications, and all the details of the project, and also to understand the field measurements of any existing conditions. So the contractor has a right to rely on the contract documents from the architect, that they are in accordance with the proper codes, and that the contractor should not have to really worry about that, but the contractor will have to build the work in accordance with those codes. And if he finds out, the contractor finds out, that he expects additional time or cost because of the clarifications or instructions, then the architect has to issue a response to that in the form of an RFI. And the contractor shall supervise and direct the work of the site. That means the contractor has responsibility for the safety, responsibility for job site security, for securing materials, for making sure that all people that are supposed to have access to the site have access, and people that don't have access should not be having access to the site. And the contractor shall be responsible for the acts of their employees. So the contractor will be responsible to inspect the work and get the work inspected by the city officials at the proper times, so that the city will be able to approve the work and inspect the work. Labor and materials. The contractor includes all labor, materials, equipment, tools, and utilities, and their own facilities necessary to complete the work. The contractor needs to specifically follow the instructions of the specifications and plans of the project. And if the contractor wants to make a substitution, he can request that of the architect and the owner. Contractor is responsible for the job site, and so therefore shall discipline the contractor's employee and make sure that there's good order and things aren't getting out of hand and unsafe. And the contractor warrants the project for a year after the project completion. All materials have their warranties, and they should be transferred to the owner under this contract. Contractor will pay sales taxes and other taxes that are due, permit fees and notices in compliance with any local conditions and laws. Concealed or unknown condition. If the contractor does encounter concealed or unknown conditions, he must immediately notify the owner and the architect. And in no event should they ever wait more than 14 days after the observance of these conditions, because the this kind of thing is not the kind of thing that gets better with age, like a bottle of fine wine. So bad news gets very much worse as time goes on. So the contractor has to say what they expect the adjustment to be, and say that that is not part of the original contract, such as the fact that you found some kind of historical artifacts on your site or things like that. Those things are not usually known in advance. So in this 3.7.5, this outlines the procedure. The contractor shall notify and suspend operations and take action with the governmental authorities of this. So if there was an Indian burial grounds, there would be tribal authorities that would look into that, and they would have to supervise the job site for the rest of the job. Allowances. So allowances are made when people don't know exactly what item they want for certain things, and then they'll say, okay, we got light fixtures, we don't know exactly what light fixture we want, but we'll allocate $300 per light fixture for the fixture, and the normal installation fee will be the same typically no matter what kind of light fixture is used. Other allowances could be for substitution of materials. Perhaps sometimes materials maybe get back ordered and be unavailable in the time frame of the project. The superintendent. So the contractor supplies the superintendent, that's his employee, and the contractor will select this employee and notify the project team, the owner and the architect, of who their superintendent is. Contractor's schedule. So the contractor will submit the schedule initially and then update the schedule likely weekly as we go along through the project. On a large project, it's almost impossible for an exact schedule to be initiated at first, but to keep the project on schedule, there will be constantly pushing and pulling and tugging of people trying to get decisions made to keep the project moving forward on schedule. Documents and samples on site. So the contract documents, the project manual, and any construction change directives, modifications, product samples should all be stored at the job site until the completion of the job, so that people have access to this reference material as the job is being constructed. And the shop drawings and product data and samples are used to illustrate some portion of the work. And let's see, the contractor has a very specific schedule on receiving a shop drawing, reviewing it, and sending it back with their decision. And continuing along here, the use of the site. The contractor controls the site, and the contractor controls any cutting into the existing job site, pavement, and so on. And the contractor makes sure that no subcontractors damages or endangers another subcontractor's work that's already been done. And the contractor, overall general contractor, is responsible for the cleanup and for the trash removal on the site. Access to the work, and the owner and the architect need access to the work whenever they're called on site, so the contractor shall grant them access. Royalties and patent fees and license fees all have to be paid by the contractor should they occur during the project. Indemnification. Under the contract here, the architect and owner are harmless for the action of the contractor and his employees. So in claims against the contractor, the employee of the contractor themselves could actually be liable, but generally they're saying it's not limited to that. It could be the entire company which is liable for some kind of act of omission or negligence. The architect, this defines the architect that licensed architect that the owner shall hire due to the contract, and administration of the contract. So the typical contract administration for construction for the architect would be around 10% of his initial architectural fee, and usually that involves a weekly job site visit and communication on all of the details back and forth with the RFIs, with the contractors. A bigger project may have multiple meetings per week. So a larger project such as a airport or something could have 2 to 3 meetings per week. You have meetings with the airport authorities, and then you have meetings with the actual airlines themselves. And then we have review by the state architect of those types of institutional facilities. So each project varies depending on what type of project that is. The owner and the contractor have a communication plan and include the architect in the chain of anything that is going on here. The owner is the final deciding factor for change orders and how to proceed in the case of the applications for payment. So the architect will review applications for payment, and the owner makes the final decision on what it is that has been paid. So the architect will recommend to the owner a certain percentage of completion, and some owners will just take that as it is. Other owners will take that and modify that even further beyond what the architect is saying. The architect will review shop drawings, submittals from the contractor under the contract within the time frame shown here in accordance with the submittal schedule. So they'll review a submittal schedule. For example, the architect will agree with the contractor and say, you send me a shop drawing, I will review it and get it back to you within 10 days. So the 10-day process makes sure that the architect has time to review it and that the contractor gets it back and has time to act on it. And change orders and change directives may include some minor changes to the work. The architect will inspect the site certain times, although not specifically at any given time, and interpretations of the architect will be consistent with the code and the most reasonable interpretations of the authorities having jurisdiction. Subcontractors, Article 5. Subcontractor is the entity that the general contractor hires to perform a portion of the work. So they have to have an ethical process to sign up and find these contractors. The typical process includes RFP and selecting the contractors based on one of the methods of selection. The subcontractual relations of the contractor to the subcontractor shall be revealed to the owner and is not hidden from the owner. And contingent assignment of subcontracts. Should a subcontractor fail, the contractor has the responsibility to get the work done, so they may assign that subcontractor to a new contractor that can perform the work in that case. Stay tuned. There's part 2 and part 3 of the A201. All right, class. Thanks.